I'm not going to waste any words that come out of your mouth. Hi, Jannese. It is so good to see you.
Same. I'm so excited to connect after so much time. So much has changed, and I'm so excited to share everything that's going on.
We're going to talk about all of it. Okay. So we're going to talk about it. But first of all, I just wanted to say huge congratulations on your new book, Financially Lit. It's out there. People can go buy it. How does it feel?
Honestly, this has been the most out-of-body experience I've ever had. Just seeing your words on paper, it's an unreal experience. It's also the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So for anybody who's aspiring to be an author, ooh, um, just prepare yourself.
We're going to be talking a lot about this book. I had a chance to take a look at it, and there's some really, really good nuggets there. If anybody's looking to go and buy it, I'm going to put the link in the show notes so people can go and get it right now, because you get into a lot of really detailed strategies on how to improve your financial situation. But first, before we start, can you please remind everybody, what is it that you do right now and who do you help right now?
Oh, I love this question. So, my name is Jannese Torres. I am a personal finance expert and podcaster, and I help women, especially women of color, build businesses and gain financial freedom.
So here's the deal. I interviewed you back in the fall of 2021,
Oh my gosh.
right? It's like a lifetime ago. And we got into your entire story of quitting your job, of like all of these things back then. So if anybody's looking for that story, just go to episode 55. We really dove very deep. We spent an hour just talking about how you got there. But a lot has happened since then. And you are going to forgive me because we are going to start right, like we're just going to dive straight into what people want to hear about. Back then, you were Jannese Torres Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
It has changed. It is
Yes.
now Jannese Torres.
Yeah.
And there is an entire story that comes along with it. You share about it in your book. And I want you to tell us just a little bit of, why did you get a divorce? What were the things that were happening at the time? This is stuff that you've been public about. I don't want people to come and come after me like, why are you asking her such personal questions? This is
Yeah.
actually very, very relevant to your financial health. So I want everybody to hear, what was that story?
Yeah, absolutely. The crazy part of this whole thing is that this was actually happening while I was writing the book. So it was not part of the original plan to write about prenups and divorce and how money affects your love life, but it evolved into a place where I need to add this to this book because this is something that I had to personally navigate while I was on this journey. So I realized early on in my relationship that me and my ex were completely different when it came to money. So from very early on, when we moved in together, I always kept my finances separate. His credit was terrible, money management skills were terrible. And it's not to say that someone, you can have different ways of handling money in a relationship, but if someone doesn't want to change, that's kind of a red flag, and I know that now with the hindsight. But for me, I was like, well, I don't agree with how you operate, so I'm going to keep my stuff separate. And we got married, and nothing really changed from that perspective, too. Over time, we drifted apart. There was a lot of things that happened in the relationship, but I found myself in a place where I had to make a choice. It was time to go. But 18 months before that, I had had a life-changing conversation with a financial professional that absolutely changed how this divorce could potentially have impacted me. And speaking to other entrepreneurs who had to go through divorce after building businesses, I know how catastrophic that can be, both emotionally and financially. So before all this happened, and this was right at the point where I was planning to transition from my career as an engineer into becoming a full-time entrepreneur, my Latina CFP, shout out to her, and she's also mentioned in the book, said, after reviewing my financial situation, I would love for you to get a postnuptial agreement because you are out here building real wealth that you need to protect. Now, you never go into marriage thinking that it's going to end up in divorce, but you should absolutely have a plan in the event that that happens. And so I ended up getting a postnuptial agreement that basically separated all of the assets that I had been building, including my business. And so when it came to a point that I was ready to file for divorce, the process was so much more streamlined, and there was none of the chaos that I've spoken to other entrepreneurs that they've experienced in this process. It was very much cut and dry. The courts reviewed the documents. Everything stayed separate. I didn't have to pay any alimony. I didn't lose my business. I came out of pocket $500 in total for my divorce, which when you think about somebody that has multiple six-figure net worth, assets, properties, etc., it could have been absolutely insane. And so in that journey, I realized how critical it was for other people to have this information, because I know there's so many people who are starting businesses that listen to my podcast. And I don't want this generation of women, which is the first of its kind to be able to even build the type of wealth that we're seeing, right? There's been so many changes in legislation and just society that have allowed us to create things that we could not have even anticipated in the past. And we need to protect it. We need to move differently than maybe we saw our mothers and grandmothers move.
You need to tell us a little bit about what the conversation was like with your ex-husband about the post-nuptial agreement. I had actually never heard of it before you mentioned it, before you started talking about it. I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought the prenup was your one chance and you missed it and that was it. So when this idea came about from your financial planner and you went up to him, I'm here imagining all women out there who have kind of like a tricky relationship with their spouse, right? Where like you don't really like to talk about money because you know things are a mess and people are going to get defensive of like, oh, you're just targeting me, you're just attacking me, right? Like it never really leads to a very productive conversation, let alone getting lawyers to draft something when you're not even thinking of getting a divorce at that point. So I'd love to know what went into it emotionally and how did
Yeah.
that go?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question that I get from a lot of people who've heard my story. They're like, well, that sounds like a very awkward conversation to have. And honestly, for me, I think there was two things that were in my favor that made it pretty much a normal conversation. One was the fact that we had never combined our finances. So it wasn't like I was asking for this system that we'd built together to now be separated, because that can be very difficult. There's a lot that goes into understanding who did what and who put in what. And so I think that was definitely an advantage that I had, because it was basically just how we were already operating. But secondly, having the financial professional to kind of default this decision to and be like, well, it wasn't my idea. She just said it's a great thing that we should both do because I'm building a business. There's risk in that. I don't want you to necessarily have some sort of liability if something were to happen, because obviously this is a marital asset. So it's like it's protecting them as much as it is protecting you. And I think that's a lot of the stigma that we need to get past when it comes to the conversations about prenups. There's always like this stigma, right? Where the person who like has something to lose is trying to keep the other person down, or, you hear all those narratives and see them even played out like in movies and TV shows and whatnot. But I think when you really get to the nitty gritty, it's meant to protect both parties. And it's meant for you to just create an emergency plan for your marriage if it just ends up becoming something that is unsustainable.
Mm-hmm. So, how is life now after all of that happened? If anybody has gone to your stories, we are being introduced to a new kind of man who picks up a broom and actually does things without you asking, and it seems so alien to a lot of us. Please tell us, share with us a little bit of your happiness right now, because we all need a little bit of that hope.
I love that. When I got divorced, I definitely was spiraling in the sense of like being in my upper 30s. I'm like, I'm never going to find love. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like life is over for me. And it's just crazy. Like the things that we tell ourselves, right? It's like, if your whole life is not figured out by like 25, apparently, there's no hope for you. So after about like 6 months of therapy and just working with different modalities and healing and doing a lot of personal development work, I found myself like ready to get back out there in the dating world. But I knew I didn't want to just go about it in the same way that I had in my teens, because me and my ex met like in college. So I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my life was going to turn into. Now, having this established life, I knew I wanted to bring someone in who was going to be a complement to my life and who was going to understand kind of this weird world that we live in as entrepreneurs. This is not a normal life that you sign up for when you're with somebody who just does not have a set schedule, works from anywhere, just projects can come about and then I can have like time off. So it was important for me to have someone who understood that lifestyle and who was not going to subscribe to a lot of the toxic narratives that exist, especially in like the Latino community, as far as like what women should be doing and what men should be doing and those gender roles that really don't serve either of us. So I kind of put myself back out there and I found an incredible partner who has broken a lot of like taboos that I had had in my head. He's younger than me, which I said I was never going to date someone younger than me. He is a former entrepreneur who went back into corporate because he realized it wasn't for him at the time, but now he's going back into entrepreneurship. So there was just so many synergies that we had as far as like our values, the things that we care about, the kind of lifestyle that we want. It's been a really healing experience in its own right, just knowing that there are other people out there are good people out there, and you have to almost like give yourself permission to explore the unknown when you realize that your existing environment is no longer serving you.
Now that you mention it, it just makes me think he seems very different from your ex. And
Yeah.
this is actually not, it's not the norm for us to go from somebody who has, a lot of chaos in their life, and for us to have been at one point attracted to
Yeah.
somebody who had that kind of life, to now kind of changing our mind and going for somebody who is a lot more established. It seems like there's a lot of internal work, a lot of growth that needs to happen for you
Yeah.
to no longer accept what was before and start accepting something new. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know that you've done the inner work on this. I'd love to hear your perspective on that change.
Yeah, I think if I have to distill it down to like a phrase that you can say to yourself or some sort of mantra, my whole thing was date with intention, not for attention. Loneliness and the desire to be with somebody can really make us just kind of ignore a lot of red flags just because somebody's giving me, a morsel of attention, even if this person is not aligned with your values, your lifestyle, the way that you want to live. Like there's just so many things that go into play versus just like physical attraction. And you have to think bigger than that. You have to really see like, how is this person going to fit into my life? What are they adding to it? Both good and bad, right? Because you're always going to be taking on both sides of that coin when you decide to bring someone else into your life. They're going to have their quirks, they're going to have their things, they're going to have the things that are positive as well. And so you have to get just like really intentional about bringing somebody in who's going to add value to your life versus depleting it. And so that's one of the things that I had to do in my whole dating experience. And let me just say, getting back into the dating world in my late 30s with this whole world of like social media, instant gratification, dating apps, it is not for the faint of heart. But I also do want people to know that there is still hope out there, even if you see a lot of these narratives that, there's pee in the dating pool and like nobody wants a real relationship anymore. That's not true. And we have to like just give ourselves permission to understand and believe that we can create the life that we want, the love that we want, and to not settle for less because life is too short to just accept mediocrity in any part of your life.
Do you remember the moment when you knew this relationship was going to be very different?
Oh God, I think it was like on our first date, which is the thing that freaked me out because I was so used to like emotionally unavailable people and just the toxicity that when my partner was like genuinely interested from day one and like going out of his way to communicate and talk about our feelings and all this stuff, I like freaked out because I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, who are you? You can't be real. This can't be you. This has to be some sort of like sales pitch, some sort of like facade that you're putting on. And it took me a while to just like trust and believe that he was being genuine and that I was worthy of being treated that way, which I think is the biggest barrier for so many people when you've been in a relationship where you were felt, you were made to feel like you were less than or your worth was, put into question. It's part of your responsibility to like not project that onto other people, and realize that if someone is actually being genuine about their intentions and wants to show you that they care about you, like, don't always be such a skeptic, because you could be pushing people away who are for real because of your own self-worth issues.
When did he realize that he was going out with a powerhouse like you? Because I imagine this is not like first date kind of topic, like, I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
When did he know?
That's hilarious. That whole story it cracks me up, because I think one of the things that I unintentionally, or maybe like just subconsciously manifested, was I don't want anybody who's like in the business world, who's an influencer, who's like out here doing this, because it's weird. I feel like there can be some sort of like competition or animosity that can come when like both people are in that same arena. And so when I met my partner, he's like, well, I don't have any social media. I just feel like it's a huge waste of time, and it's just not something that serves me. And I have better things to do. And the only thing that I do is I watch YouTube. I'm like, okay. So he had no idea who I was, which was hilarious. And then, I tell him, he asked me what I do. I'm like, oh, I'm a full-time podcaster, blah, blah, blah. Send him my link. He goes home and he's like, oh, like you're kind of a big deal. You're not just like doing this as a hobby, but also it's never been like a really intense, detailed conversation that we've had, because he's always told me, like, I mean, I really don't care what you do, in the sense, like, I'm not here to be a fanboy. I'm just here to be your partner. Like, I love Jannese. I don't care about all this other shit you have going on. So, it's very refreshing to just be with somebody who just genuinely sees me as the person, besides all of the glitz and the glamour and the stuff that's going on, behind the scenes.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, because I know that's what people want to know. We want to know because we have seen you, right, go from all of that growth and go through the divorce and now finding happiness. It's like, we are so happy for you. I am
Thank
so
you.
happy for you. And I love to see that in yourself. Like, I love to just, well, like, pour all that love onto you every time that I see you talking about this. So thank you for sharing all of this with us.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you something, going back to when you were with your husband and you're building all of this wealth. In your book, you shared that at the time that you were doing the postnup, you already had like $500,000 in investments, right? So I want to kind of understand a little bit of what that dynamic was, where here is somebody who does not think of his financial security as a priority, right? If I
Yeah,
can read just a quick excerpt of your
sure.
book, and I want to stress that, this is not about him. I really want
Yeah.
to stress that is really the dynamic that you had with him, because that's what our listeners want to hear. Like, how do I, like, what was happening here, so that they can recognize it for themselves. This is not about him.
Yeah.
He can have his own podcast. But I care about this. So if I can read just a passage from the book. You said, my ex-husband was terrible with money since the day we met, and over our 16-year relationship and our 9-year marriage, none of that changed. He defaulted on student loans, credit cards, and car loans. He racked up unpaid tax debts, multiple assets, multiple arrests for drinking and driving, and legal debt to deal with those issues. Debt collectors would send letters to our home asking for their money. He was utterly uninterested in learning anything about money, how to use it as a tool. Finally, you revealed that he took one of your credit cards and maxed it out to pay for legal fees that he couldn't afford. So here's somebody, like, I just wanted to like paint a picture of the kind of financial chaos that was going on in your marriage. This is like the closest relationship you have in your life, while
Yeah.
at the same time you are applying budgets and investment choices, and everything that you describe in your book is so detailed about estate planning, everything you need to have in there. So I want to really know, what did he think was happening here, and how did you reconcile the wealth you were building with what you're seeing right next to you in the closest relationship of your life?
Yeah, it was definitely, I felt like I was almost living like two different lives. This is like the life that I was creating on my own, and then this marriage that I knew had no potential, but it was just terrifying to think about leaving after so much time. There's so much that we wrap up in our identities as spouses, and like our families are involved, and there's so much that has to be sort of reconciled when you decide to make that that much of a change. So for me, I think I was honestly subconsciously operating in the mindset that I just want to be ready when this is over. I feel like I knew years before I got divorced that this was not going to be the type of relationship where I was going to be fulfilled and that was going to last. And so I think that's why I did want to create that sort of financial cushion for myself so that I knew if anything happens, I have my own back. My retirement's okay. My financial security is okay. And it was, now that looking back at it, it was very much just like planning for the inevitable, and so there was never like financial meetings that we had like discussing goals. And whenever I asked about money, it was just always very vague, the answers that I got. There was no visibility. I didn't know what was going on with his finances. He didn't know what was going on with mine. And I just got to a point, you try to help your partner make changes, but after a certain point, when you realize this is kind of a fruitless effort, I was just like, it's better for me to just focus on myself. And if and when I'm ready to go.
There's something that you said in one of your podcasts that really I really heard. It was the podcast that you did with your partner now, and you were saying that even not even just the financial part, but like the kind of support that you're expecting from the person closest to you, right?
Yeah.
Like you were saying that, whenever you would show up online or do these things or like get the photo shoots and everything, that the response you were getting was, well, you just like all that attention,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, this is all about you. And I feel like there are a lot of, especially like coaches, us entrepreneurs, like that, this is our job, right? To
Yeah.
actually like get on camera, to go to the photo shoots, to go and get featured on Forbes, on CNBC, right? That PR is like part of our job. So having a partner that doesn't get it or sees it as narcissistic behavior can be
Mm-hmm.
really damaging and can be keeping you down.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, if you like, I promise we're gonna move on from this topic. It's so useful for everybody to
I
hear.
think I think this is great that we need to talk about this. These conversations are life-changing potentially.
I would love to hear from you if there's somebody out there who's struggling in that kind of dynamic in their relationship, right? And they're listening to you and they're like, man, I gotta be smarter. I gotta figure this out. If somebody's struggling with that, not seeing just financial support, but seeing like that emotional support that is just not there, what would you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to require you to really confront some hard truths about who you're with, right? Like if you've tried to have the conversation with your partner about what you need in order to feel supported and you just don't feel like there is an opening for change there, I think you're just going to have to keep it real with yourself and ask yourself, is this the type of person that I am ready to build with, that is ready to build with me? I think there's a lot of emphasis placed on the person that you chose back in the day, especially if you're like you're super young when you first met your partner. There's so much that happens as we grow up and become adults and are exposed to new things and our careers evolve, our values evolve. And if those things don't happen together, you're going to find yourself in a relationship where you have become strangers.
Hmm.
And it happens to more people than they would want to admit, but it's something that you have to recognize and you have to just accept what the situation is, right? You can only change what is within your own capacity to change. You cannot make your partner want to support you. You cannot make your partner be excited about the things that you're working on. That has to be an inherent value that they have because they care about you and they see you as a partnership versus competitors. And I think that's what happens for a lot of people when they see, especially men. I don't want to generalize, but I do think that our society and the way that the patriarchy kind of dictates our gender roles, there's a lot of men who are intimidated by the idea of their partner, who might be a woman, making more money than them. Because, there's a lot of value that's placed on a man's worth as far as how much he can earn and his ability to provide. So if you find yourself in a situation where just your dynamics are changing, your roles are changing, and that's causing conflict, you can either recognize it as a couple together, take some proactive steps, go to therapy, talk to a financial counselor. But if that doesn't work, it might just have to be the type of situation where you recognize, you know what, this part of my life, this next phase that I'm growing into needs this type of partnership. and I'm not finding what I need here, and make the decision that serves you, even if it's the difficult decision. Because I can tell you, being on the other side of it, the only regret I have is not making the choice sooner.
Thank you so much, Jannese. So
Absolutely.
we are actually going to start talking about business. Okay. We have an entire audience of coaches who's watching you blow up, and we want to know the ins and outs. So I want to ask you, this is going to start to get into like the nitty gritty, but I would love to know, you have like multiple businesses and a lot of things going on all the time. So I'd love to know, how do you organize how do you organize your business right now? Like, what do you consider to be like your top offers that you're talking about all the time? What are some of the things that the people that you have working for you, like, what does your business actually look like? Help us paint a picture.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people would be surprised to know how lean my business is. So I do earn multiple six figures a year, and my business structure, I'm the only like full-time employee.
Mhm.
So I have a couple of contractors, all of them are part-time. One of them handles the podcast side of things, where it's like the editing of the videos and the content-based portion of that. And then the other one handles administrative stuff. So like my virtual assistant, if you will, handles my schedule and travel and inquiries for business contacts and things like that. And then I work with an agent who is in charge of my brand partnerships. So anybody who reaches out to me from a corporate space who wants to work with my brand, he negotiates those contracts and approves them. And then I do the work, submit it, get paid, and give him his cut. But other than that, my work days are very fluid. I knew going into entrepreneurship that I didn't want to have a super regimented corporate type schedule where I'm working, these specific hours and these specific days. I have dedicated days for certain tasks, like podcast days or Wednesdays. Administrative days are usually like Thursdays, where I just catch up on things that I have to respond to. And Tuesdays are typically like content creation days. So I work, pretty much like 3 days a week, but I feel like people think they need more support than they usually do. And it's because they don't have systems in place.
Mm.
So a big part of me getting ready to write a book, because as you can imagine, it is a huge time consuming activity that will definitely disrupt your business if you don't put processes into place.
Mhm.
I decided I wanted to really focus in back in 2022 to put in automated sales funnels. So webinars that play on demand, email sequences that go out once you join a freebie or some sort of email list. And so I have a lot of these things kind of operating in the background that generate me income without me having to exchange time for them. And that's how I was able to write a book and not take a huge impact on my income, which I think is something that a lot of authors don't talk about openly, like how disruptive writing a book can be to your bottom line in your business. So I think if this is something that you want to do, you definitely have to get to a place where your big offers, if those are courses and things like that, like you want to put them on some sort of automated funnels that are allowing you to continue to earn income without you having to do live launches. And, getting an email list. That was a huge part of my 2022 goal list, is to bulk up that email list, get as many folks off of social media, and just slowly but surely like streamlining my business to a place where work has really become optional versus having to be this thing that I have to do in order to, sustain what I've created.
What is your best tip for creating those funnels? I'm actually in the process of experimenting right now, experimenting with ads, experimenting with the masterclass, make sure that it converts before you actually put it on Evergreen and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm going through a process right now. It's not an easy process. It's not a
No.
process that happens overnight. It's something that takes a lot of testing. I'd love to hear what your like main takeaway, like, Ina, this is what you need to know about that process.
Yeah, for me, I had to realize I am not equipped to do this on my own.
Mm.
And so I went out and sourced the help of an agency that's their whole specialty. And I made a significant investment. So if I'm looking at like overall investment, it was probably close to like $40,000 over a period of like a year and a half to have all these things put into place to make sure that everything is replicable, that when the team is gone, we can continue to manage that with the very like skeleton crew that I have here now. And that for me was like the best use of my money, because coming in to create new processes in your business can be very intimidating if you don't understand software and systems and how to interlink those things. So I was okay admitting like I'm not the smartest person for the job here. And I'm not going to frustrate myself and exhaust myself trying to become an expert via Google and YouTube. I'm going to hire professionals who are going to get me there faster and who are going to be able to create the infrastructure that then can support long-term growth in the business.
Amazing. So how do you know that you're ready to get some help? Because you've said two things, reconcile them for us, is you don't really need that many people as long as you have systems, but also invest when you need help. So what
Yeah.
is the right order and the right balance if you have never outsourced before?
Yeah, I think first is always look at software before you look at people, because it's usually going to be a cheaper proposition. And if you can get, a scheduling software that is going to take time off of you having to go back and forth, getting on a schedule with somebody, like that's going to save you hours of time that you don't necessarily have to outsource to a person. But things like that need a human touch, right? So we're talking about things like editing videos and content, or like creating email marketing funnels that actually sound like you versus using like AI to get some generic copy that you're like, this is clearly not even Ina. I don't know who the hell's talking to me in this email. There's just things that you can't outsource to software solely. And so I think before you outsource, I recommend making sure that you're consistently able to create enough income in your business to allocate some money towards that new project, right? I see a lot of business owners who, in my opinion, like have no business spending the amount of money that they're spending, because they haven't actually like proven out the system of generating revenue in a way that is consistent and that gives you that flexibility. So just get good at money, get good at making money before you start like hiring a bunch of people and thinking you got to do all these things. And I think it's also important as a business owner to exercise the power of credit. Business credit can be a thing that you can leverage very strategically in order to make these investments in your business, and while keeping your costs low and giving yourself like more time to pay off this debt. And when it comes to working with service providers, don't always think that you have to give them that total amount up front. You can absolutely work out some sort of payment plan that makes things more sustainable for you. I'd rather you work out something where you're paying over a 12-month period versus like a big chunk of money's coming out of your business and then you're stressed out about how you're going to make that up. But there's a lot of options for you to make these strategic investments. But the most important thing for me is like make sure that it's adding to your bottom line. Make sure that it's adding to your ability to make money, and it's not taking away from that.
Awesome. So let's talk about the book. I want to talk about the book. You just said you definitely needed to have all of these systems so you could free up your time to actually write the book. I'm going to tell you, as somebody who would love to write a book right now, even thinking of stepping away and like setting aside even one day of the week to write the book, that seems like, wait, can I actually do this? So I actually want to hear more than like general advice. I'd love to hear like how you went about it. Let's go from the beginning. Let's start from the idea for the book. How did you go about getting a publisher? Like, tell us about the beginnings. I want to know the book story.
Yes. So I knew I wanted my book to be traditionally published, because if you know anything about the publishing industry in general, only about 7% of authors are Latina. So
Mm.
it's an industry that's very hard to get into, and we're very much underrepresented. And I knew I wanted to kind of carry that mantle and just be part of the representation that is kind of the ethos of my brand, of just increasing representation in all these different areas. So I came upon the concept of a book proposal coach, which, if folks don't know, that's actually a thing. And this is somebody who can actually help you put together a book proposal that then you can shop around to publishers and eventually get your book deal. So my book proposal coach has worked with really incredible authors, including my mentor and friend, Farnoosh Torabi, who
Mhm.
is a really big influencer in the personal finance space. She's an OG in the podcasting space as well. And so I knew right off the bat, like if Farnoosh trusts her, and Farnoosh is like 5, 6, 7-time published author, I'm like, this is the woman that I want to work with, right? So I send her a message, we connect, I tell her the concept of the book. She's like, this sounds incredible. I'd love to be part of this. And we worked together for, I want to say like 3 months to put together this like 80-page proposal where you go through the entire process of creating this grand pitch that you're going to present to a publisher. So this is everything about like, what's the book about? Who are you? What qualifies you as an expert? Why does this book need to exist, right? You need to do your market research and see like what's the gap in the market that you've identified that this book is going to fill. What's your marketing plan? All of these things. And so we put that together and started shopping it around to publishing companies. I had meetings with 4 of them. And also part of her services was to connect me with an agent. So an agent is kind of like your intermediary with the publishing houses. They negotiate the contracts and all those things. And so I ended up getting an offer from one of the major publishers. And they gave me, I want to say that the original timeline was like 12 months to write the book. But I think it took closer to like 18 months for me because it was like I'm in the process of getting divorced and there's all this chaos that now has come about that I did not plan for. But yeah, I got a book deal and the book is coming out April 30th, 2024, which, you're not going to believe this story. This book is coming out 3 years to the day that I quit my job to do this full time.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Plus, fun fact, April 30th is my birthday.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing day.
So it is a great day. That is incredible. Like, what an homage to Jannese 3 years ago for making that decision. And
Yeah.
there you are. Like, I hope you go and send copies to your past managers.
Oh,
right?
you already know.
This has to be happening.
Yep.
This is really incredible. How did you come up with the title of the book?
So it's a play on words. So financially lit is like a play on financially literate. And it's also a play on the fact that millennials love the word lit, like everything's lit. This is so lit. So it's definitely a play on that. And my first freebie for my business was called the Financially Lit Latina. And it's a freebie guide that basically walks you through all of the content that I talk about, side hustles, investing, financial independence. And so it was sort of like a natural fit for me to extend that first creation into what is now going to be my first book.
So you have been featured on CNBC. You've been featured on Business Insider. Like right now, you're like everywhere. And I was seeing your entire like blow up blitz over the past like year that this has been happening. And you just had your very first live event. It's insane how your brand has just really gone the distance. And it has just been a delight to see. But I care about the behind the scenes. So we now know that you were setting up systems so you can be a little bit more hands-off. You can deal with everything going on personally. You could write your book. I'd love to know what role PR has played in your business. How did you decide to prioritize this? You're already making money. You already have all of these investments. You're already working on your book. Where did PR become like a big priority that we need to focus on?
I think this is going to surprise a lot of people. I literally don't spend any money on PR. Like I've never had a publicist. I've never even like openly pitched a media agency of any kind. All of the press that I've gotten is organic. And I think it's based on a couple things. One is the fact that my brand has so many like public facing aspects of it, right? It has the podcast, it has the blog, it has the social media platforms. So we just have a really large reach. And part of my experience as a blogger, it lends to the understanding that it's important for you to like really get clear on the niche and create content that is highly searchable and that fits in like what those keywords that you want people to know you for. So like if you type in personal finance for Latinas on Google, I'm inevitably going to come up, right? And so that's a big part of how I get discovered on the internet, just because I know exactly like who my audience is and I create content that's very much aligned with that. But when it comes to the role that PR has played, it's really just been doing what I do and like people noticing it. And I know that sounds ridiculous, it's like, okay, there has to be more than that, but it's really not any more complicated than that. It's just kind of getting comfortable owning that expertise and like sharing that. And that's what people want more of. You know, I've gotten so many stories on like Business Insider and CNBC just by sharing my journey, sharing my milestones as an entrepreneur. When somebody sees me post a tweet that like, this is my third year making six figures as a blogger, there's a million people looking at those posts at all times. And some of them are journalists, some of them, you know, are PR, and they want to know. This is an interesting story. And so I think part of just you getting attention is you sharing your story. That's what we're all doing here on social media. So my best advice is to just really like get comfortable telling your story, because you never know who's paying attention and what those opportunities are going to come, just from you being open and honest.
It just reminds me of what you hear say, um, be so good that you can't be ignored.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I feel like that's exactly what is at play here. So knowing I mean, how amazing life has turned out all this time. I'm going to ask you two questions so we can have the yin and yang. I would love for you to tell us, number one, what is your biggest challenge right now? And then give us the flip side of what's in the future? What is next for Jannese? So let's start with your biggest challenge.
I think my biggest challenge is not feeling like I need to be in competition with like yesterday's version of myself. And I
Mm,
think what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, especially as you go and scale and grow, there's always like this thing in the back of your head, like, "Oh, I should be doing more. Or if I made six figures this year, I should definitely make seven figures next year. And if I don't, then I'm a failure."
mm,
And I've had to get very clear on where I'm feeling the pressure from. It's usually not my own. It's usually externally being influenced by the things that I'm seeing, by comparison, by imposter syndrome. And I've just really had to do a lot of work around defining what is enough and what is actually success to me. It's an ongoing struggle. You know, there are moments where I'm like, "Ugh, I don't know if I'm doing enough. I don't know if I should be doing more, if I should be further along." And then I have to remind myself, like, who am I trying to make these milestones for? Right? Because when I think back to my life before an entrepreneur, I was doing a lot of things for a lot of other people. I
mhm.
was going to college because my parents said that was a good choice. I got a master's degree because, hey, maybe I just want to be the first in my family to be able to hang my hat on that title. I went into engineering because, oh, well, they said you can make a lot of money doing this. And as I hit all of these incredible milestones, which externally you should think like, wow, you should be so happy and successful and satisfied. I got further and further away from all of those feelings. And so I'm not really trying to replicate those emotions in my business where I feel like I've somehow lost my identity along this journey because I've been trying to live somebody else's version of success.
Yeah, absolutely love that because I feel like it's something we all struggle with as
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. So tell us what is next? What is your like next big whale?
You know, I'm definitely planning on taking some time to myself because I definitely feel like I have been at the beck and call of many people who are expecting a lot of me. You know, in the process of writing a book, there's a lot of folks that you have to be accountable to. There's a lot of people who are making a bet on you and investing in your dreams. And so I'm looking forward to celebrating this book coming out. I'm looking forward to meeting with people in person. I'm going to be going on a multi-city book tour. You can find out details about where I'll be stopping at financiallylitbook.com. And I'm just really, really excited to just sit and absorb the impact of what I've created and hear how the book is impacting people's real lives.
Love it. And are you coming to Boston?
I am in the process of finalizing
Really?
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep an eye on this because that would be
Yes.
amazing. So yeah, we're gonna put that link below so people can see if you're coming to a city near them so that they can go and grab the book and get to see you face to face. So before we wrap, can you please tell us what you think is the biggest misconception that people have of you as a successful businesswoman?
Mm. I think they think I just started doing this recently, you know, and I have to remind myself and other people that I've been doing online entrepreneurship for 11 years now,
Mhm.
and understanding the world of content creation and how it's changed and just all the different identities I've had along this journey. It's easy for folks to see me and think like, wow, she just figured it out. And a couple years in, she's made all this money. I was broke for the first 3 years. It took me 4 years to make my first $10,000. It took me 7 years to make my first $100,000 in a single year. And so I just want folks to remember all of these successful entrepreneurs that you are comparing yourself to. Make sure you are actually giving yourself context into how long it got them or how long it took them to get to the place where now you see them as successful, because there's a lot of those long nights, those sacrifices that you don't know about that are important to understand the true sacrifice that has been put in to see the success that you experience today.
Thank you for sharing that. And finally, if everybody had to do one thing to become financially lit, and they have to do this thing in the next 24 hours, what would that thing be?
It's not going to be pleasant, but it's going to change your life if you decide to do this. And it is getting so clear about what your actual situation is right here, right now with your money. Like, I will tell you, the first time that I calculated my net worth and saw the in my face numbers of this is how much money I owe, this is how much I have saved, what is happening here? How did this happen? But knowing where you start is how you can start to make changes, right? I always compare it to, like, let's say you want to go on a weight loss journey, but you don't measure yourself on day one. How the heck are you going to know what kind of progress you've made if you don't have that starting information? So when you know where you're starting from, you can start to make a plan to make the necessary changes and eventually find yourself in a place where money is not an obstacle, it's not a burden, it is actually a tool that you've been able to use to gain financial freedom.
Love it. And everybody needs to go and get your book. I'm going to put the link below so everybody can go and get it. So, Jannese, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for being so generous. Please tell everybody where to find you, where to find your book, how to follow you.
Absolutely. So you can find out more about the book at financiallylitbook.com. It's available at all major retailers, including Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and more. I also have an accompanying audiobook that I narrate. So if you love listening to the podcast, you're going to love listening to the book. And if you want more of my weekly financial advice, you can find it at the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast, available wherever you tune in to your podcast, Ina.
And all those links are going to be below. Jannese, you have no idea how happy I have been to see you succeed, to see you blow up all misconceptions about what it's like to become financially independent and to make it really possible and accessible for Latinas out there. So on behalf of everybody, I just thank you for your content, for staking it out, for never giving up, because you are really changing lives. And I am just honored to have you here and having able to share your story. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for that, Ina. That means a lot.